What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. Another fun video for you guys. This one we're back in Historic with an Abzan list. Underrealm lands. It's focused on a couple of cards we got in the Historic Anthology too. And first one we're going to look at here is Terravore. It's 1 green for a 0/0 with trample. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of land cards in all graveyards. So not just your own, but it also includes your opponent's as well. So any Fabled Passages or Field of Runes or anything like that that your opponent is doing, we will also benefit from as well. And the other creature we're looking at here is Knight of the Reliquary. It's 1 green and white for a 2/2. It gets +1/+1 for each land card in your graveyard, and it has activated ability where you can tap it and sacrifice a forest or plains, search your library for any land card, and put it onto the battlefield untapped. So that's pretty sweet. And just being a 2/2 naturally that gets the +1/+1 is pretty nice as well. So we're in all 4 of these, so we can always play this on curve as needed. And however, it only counts our own graveyards. That's something to keep in mind. And of course, Underrealm Lich. It's part of the namesake of the deck because it's just such a powerful engine here. 4/3 for 5 isn't great, but however, these abilities are pretty impressive. It's if you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library and put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So by the time we get our Lich down, we're pretty much going to have all the lands we need in play. So we can dig 3 cards through our library, pick whichever spell we need the most, a creature or maybe some removal spell, and then dump another land or 2 into our graveyard and power up our Terravore and Knight of the Reliquary. It also has this other activated ability we can pay 4 life to give it indestructible until end of turn. So you do have to tap it, so it's not perfect necessarily. If your opponent goes to like hit it with a removal spell before combat, if you want to save it, obviously you have to pay the 4 life and tap it before combat. So it's a little awkward in those situations. However, it's very great protection against like board wipes, Kaya's Wraths, and things like that. Shatter the Sky, you can just pay the 4 life and give it indestructible, and then you keep your creature around and your powerful card draw engine going. So that's pretty sweet. And so going back here to the 1-drop slot here, we got a 1 of Shadowspear, just a nice equipment spell. We give a creature +1/+1 trample and lifelink, and we also pay 1 to so that permanents are on our opponent's side, lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Obviously we do have a lot of targeted removal, so this can come in handy in that regard. But mostly just here to give our Terravore or Knight of the Reliquary some lifelink, and in case of the Knight of the Reliquary, trample, because obviously the Terravore naturally has trample on its own. We do need a little bit of early interaction, so we're running a couple of Baffling Ends, because we can exile a creature on our opponent's side for 3 mana or less, and even if they have a way to get rid of a Baffling End, they get a 3/3 dinosaur token instead of their creature back, so we get a permanently exile it essentially, so that's better than like a Glass Cascade or something like that. And we can start filling up our graveyard here with Mire Triton, running all 4 of these as a 2/1 with Death Touch, and we put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard, and we gain 2 life. So this is a nice all-around spell, gain a little bit of life against the aggressive decks. It's got Death Touch, so it makes for a nice deterrent for our opponent attacking into us, so we can kind of get set up. And it puts a couple cards into our graveyard. Presumably one of them will likely be a land, and kind of get our engine going that way. It's going to be running a 1 of Binding of the Titans. It's a 2 mana saga with 3 chapters. First one is each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. So obviously we're going to be milling our opponent with this one in addition to ourselves, so it's nice fuel for Terravore. And the second chapter is we can exile 2 target cards from graveyards, and for each creature card exiled this way, you gain a life. Obviously we're not going to be targeting lands with this, so anything with escape or any other creatures that we have on our opponent's side will give us that 1 or 2 points of life, which is a nice little bonus here, help us buy some time. And the third chapter is we get to bring a creature or land back from our graveyard to our hand. So anything that we've self-milled, we can get it back. If we need a land for a little bit of color fixing or that 4th or 5th mana to cast our Underrealm Lich or whatever the case may be, we can get our land back. Otherwise, if we milled one of our Terravores or Knight of the Reliquary, we can get that back to our hand as well. So just a nice little way to fill up our graveyard, but also kind of get some creatures back or even a land back as well. And a little bit of life gain and some graveyard interaction as well. Just some nice bonuses in certain matchups. And of course, all 4 Glowspore Shaman. 3-1 for 2 mana is pretty decent stats. And when it enters, we put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard. And then we can put a land card from our graveyard on top of our library. So if we are looking for that little bit of color fixing, you know, that 3rd, 4th land or whatever, we can get the land back into on top of our library, so we can make sure we draw that next turn. That's assuming we already have spells in hand. Otherwise, you probably just want to leave that land into your graveyard to power up your Terravore and Knight. And for some utility removal, we're running 3 Banishing Light, so we can exile any target non-land permanent on our opponent's side. And a couple of Midnight Reapers. There's a nice 3-drop, 3/2 creature, and a little bit of a card draw here. We don't mind for our Glowspore Shaman or Mire Triton die. So this gives us a little bit of card draw, so we can kind of block and just kind of hold down the fort while we're kind of getting set up with getting lands into our graveyard, finding our Terravore and Knight of the Reliquary, getting those guys online, and getting set up that way. Midnight Reaper kind of helps draw into additional lands, creatures, whatever the case may be. And we're just running Terravore as a 3-of, because we're not always want to play this on curve, because it is have base 0/0, so sometimes you're going to get to turn 3 and you may not even have milled any lands by that point, and so you're just going to have to hold it for a little bit, otherwise it will just die immediately as a 0/0. Whereas Knight of the Reliquary just is naturally a 2/2, and so we're fine casting that on curve, so running all 4. And because we are kind of a slower mid-range deck, we do want kind of a reset button here, so we're going to run 1 Shatter the Sky. I like this better than like a Ritual of Soot or a Kaya's Wrath, because Ritual of Soot kind of misses some creatures sometimes, and Shatter the Sky is only double white and then 2 colorless, whereas Kaya's Wrath is double black and double white. I mean, 3 colors, it can be kind of tricky to cast that with any consistency, especially if you need to play this like on curve. Because if our opponent is going wide, then they're probably very aggressive, and you want to make sure you can cast this as soon as possible in those matchups. And kind of similar reason we're running 1 Knight Eat to Extinction, as it's just 1 black and 3 for an instant speed way to exile a creature or a planeswalker, and then has this nice little bit of synergy where we can look at the top card of our library and put that card into our graveyard. So if we're already set up with lands, we can just, if we happen to have a land on top of our library, Eat to Extinction can put that into our graveyard, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this deck. So it's a nice little bit of synergy, and just the 1 black is better than like a Vraska's Contempt or something like that. And just being able to exile something permanently and not have to worry about them removing like a Banishing Light or something like that is nice just to have 1 of. And we're running 2 Ravenous Chupacabras as a 2/2 for 4. It's not great. However, when it enters, we get to destroy target creature and opponent controls. So whatever big creature our opponent has that we need to clear the way for our Terravore or Knight of the Reliquary to start swinging through, or if we're just kind of using this defensively, just kind of slow our opponent down while we're continuing to get set up. Ravenous Chupacabra is just a nice little threat, and we do have ways of getting it back. Obviously, Binding of Titans, or even this card right here, Acolyte of Affliction. It's a 2 green and black for a 2/3. So obviously 4 mana 2/3 isn't great, but it's pretty decent stats overall. However, what we're looking at is we get to put the top 2 cards of our library into our graveyard, and we can return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. So this is better in this list for me than a Golgari Findbroker, which is double black and double green, which is going to be very tricky to pull off. And then this one also has the upside if you can put additional cards into our graveyard, so additional lands typically. And then we still get to return a permanent from our graveyard to our hand. So any creatures, if we do need that 5th land, or maybe we're missing a 2nd color for some reason, we can always get that back. So obviously Chupacabra and things like that. Maybe we milled a Shadowspear earlier, and we can get that back. Also Vraska is a planeswalker. We can get that back with Acolyte of Affliction. Vraska herself is a 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker. It's kind of a nice card draw engine that you can potentially sacrifice lands to gain life, draw cards, and put more lands into your graveyard, assuming you're set up at that point. Or mostly it's just going to be there for the -3 to destroy any non-land permanent with mana cost 3 or less. And if Vraska does stick around a little bit, you can -9. Whenever a creature you control deals damage to a player, that player loses the game. Obviously Shadowspear gives trample, Terravore has trample, so definitely some uses in that regard. And we also have one of Elspeth Conquers Death. It's a really powerful saga here at 5 mana. When it comes down, we can exile a permanent an opponent controls with mana cost 3 or greater, so kind of the opposite of Vraska. The second chapter can be kind of disruptive to those controlling mid-rangey decks, because their non-creature spells now cost 2 more to cast. And we are doing, because of that self-mill, this third chapter is very relevant, as we get to return a creature or planeswalker card from our graveyard to the battlefield, and it gets an additional counter or +1 counter or loyalty counter on it. So we get our Vraska back and keep using it as a removal spell, get our Terravore, Knight, whatever the case may be, creature-wise, get that back, maybe a Chupacabra or Acolyte, or maybe if we milled the Underrealm Lich, we can get that back as well. So having the self-mill, trying to fill up our graveyard with lands, but sometimes you are going to hit creatures, and so we do have some nice little ways to kind of get those creatures or other permanents back when we need to. So we're running 25 lands because we are pretty mana hungry. So a couple plains, the one Castle Locthwain, just a nice card draw engine in the mid to late game, a couple swamps, 3 forests, all the shocklands, Godless Shrine, Overgrown Tomb, Temple Garden, and of course 4 Fabled Passage. It's a great way to fix our mana while filling up our graveyard with lands. And then 1 Field of Ruin serves kind of a similar function while also destroying any problematic non-basic lands on our opponent's side. And going over the sideboard real quick, for those control mid-rangey matchups, we're going to run all 4 Agonizing Remorse. So we can look at our opponent's hand and get rid of a non-land card from it, or potentially something from their graveyard, and that goes to exile, so that's a nice bit of upside. A couple of Legion's End, since we're kind of a slower deck, it's a nice way to kind of interact with those aggressive decks that have a lot of 4-ofs in the 1 and 2 drop slots. So we can exile all creatures that are on the battlefield, plus in their hand that are of that of whatever we target. So that's a pretty powerful spell in certain situations. And going around one of Assassin's Trophy, just some instant speed interaction, and just kind of a catch-all to remove anything on our opponent's side, even like a land, like a Field of the Dead or something like that, as we can destroy any permanent on our opponent's side. And Pharika's Libation is a way for us to kind of get around hexproof, while also kind of dealing with things like a Facet, those indestructible enchantment creatures. And so pretty powerful in those situations. And also for Field of the Dead, we're in a couple of Virulent Plague, as creature tokens get -2/-2. But this also works really well against like mono red with like Annex, because obviously Annex can create creature tokens, and with this they do not get tokens. And there's other decks as well that can be creature token based. This will work against, so something to keep in mind. And Knight of Autumn as a 3-of, just a nice versatility here for a 3-mana 2/1. And we get to choose one of these abilities, either put 2 +1 counters on it, we can destroy an artifact or enchantment, or we can gain 4 life. So this is mostly for like the mono red or other kind of aggressive type matchups, but just having the artifact or enchantment removal and being able to gain life. And obviously we have ways of getting permanents back, and so potentially replaying this multiple times. Just a lot of nice upside there. And then for those aggressive go wide decks we kind of struggle with sometimes, so just 1 more of Shatter the Sky. So that's pretty much the deck. Let's jump into some historic, ranked, best of 3, and see how we do. Alright, first opponent already up against Blad Vaser. New season just started, so we're down here in the silver ranks. Wow. I mean, we have all of our colors. All 3 basics. We can play our 2 and 3 drops on curve. And depending on where our opponent is up to, you might want to get our, if we do mill a land with the Glowspore Shaman, maybe get something back to make sure we can have Vraska online, ready to remove something from our opponent. So I think we just lead with Swamp here. Doesn't really matter too much. Alright, Swamp on our opponent's side. A Vampire of the Diamond, sure. I think I'm fine with just getting the Shaman online. Give us more options. And we'll grab a Fabled Passage so we can kind of figure out what we need here on turn 4. Okay, it's a good Baffling End target. Plains, a Baffling End, they're the Knight of Elon Legion. And we can play our Vraska next turn. And follow it up with either Elspeth Conquers Death or Knight of the Reliquary. Okay, our opponent probably just has some removal, that's fine. So grab a Forest, get our Knight down. If they have removal, so be it. It's exile, we can always get it back later potentially. I'd like to at least get some value off this Vraska before we start playing it. Need to Extinction, sure. Okay, so I know we have some of those in their deck. So definitely still want to hang on to Vraska, make sure we can use it for removal. Do need a second white source for this Elspeth Conquers Death, so depending on what they have. If they're running things like 8-2 Extinction, I'm sure they have something that we want at Elspeth Conquers Death. So let's just continue to hold for now. If they do play a creature, we can just 8-2 Extinction as well, depending on what it is. Or if they're running like a Sorin maybe. But Elspeth answers that either way. Gruesome Scourge. Okay, that's not what I was expecting. Yeah, I think we'll just get our Elspeth Conquers Death going. They're running 3 and 4 mana removal spells. It's going to make things a little bit tricky for them. The second chapter. Shepherd. Okay. It's mono blacks. They don't really have ways of dealing with Banishing Light. But 8-2 Extinction is fine, so we can fix our draw. So we can get a creature or something. Terravore is fine. Our tune tapped, so there you go. And we do have 1, 2, 3 lands in our graveyard. And we also have another Terravore in there already. Kind of Ritual Set or something, but it's not likely, so yeah, just run it out there. So there you go. So 3-3 and a 4-4 with Trample, and we got some removal in hand. Still think we hold this Vraska a little bit. Certainly reasonable to play it and start sacking these lands to get some card draw going and power up these Terravores. Our opponent looking through our graveyard. They have Command the Dreadhorde. They have the Vampire in their own. It'll be easy to pay 1 month. Chupacabra, okay. That's impressive. Get rid of the 4-4, makes sense. So we can Banishing Light and Vraska here. 1 mana. Wow, Bone Splinters. Okay. Our opponent just had it all. We do have Acolyte of Affliction though. Alright. Well, we have removal in hand. Let's just get our Terravore back. Get it online. And if they don't have an answer, we have some removal in hand. That's perfect. Alright. Let's Banishing Light first. Okay, we have counter spells in their mono black vampire list. Keep our Vraska online. That's fine.
Will make a nice. It's not often I'm outmaneuvered.
We do have to use it as a removal spell, but our opponent is just about out of resources. And potentially start drawing cards with it next turn. They seem like they're very controlling, removal heavy counter spells. So it's not over yet. Murder. And I had to check our Acolyte before they played it. That's amusing. Okay. We should still have 2 more basics. Okay, so I must have milled one of them. We're going to attack you 2. And let's get some value off of this.
Don't dwell on what's about to happen.
We're fine losing a forest. A Baffling End. So if they have another vampire here, we have the Baffling End. Nothing. Okay. Let's attack for 4.
It was probably going to die anyway.
I'm fine with yeah, found another land anyway, so yeah. We're still in a good spot here. I'd have to play a threat and a removal spell, so they find a gruesome menagerie. They can get back their vampire. Okay, Bloodthirsty Aerialist as well as their vampire of the Dire Moon. But we have answers for both, so it's fine. Even Vraska can kill them. So Banishing Light the Aerialist, and Baffling End can answer the Dire Moon. Mono black vampire, splashing blue for some control. Not sure there's much we need to change. Just need to kind of play around counter spells a little bit. I don't think Knight is relevant. Trophy, maybe. We didn't see Sorin and that kind of thing, though I would assume they would be playing it if they're in vampires. Of course, Banishing Light can answer that. Legion End is tempting. I don't know. Elspeth Conqueror's Death was just okay. And that random, what, 5-drop? It does answer the Aerialist as well. Maybe we'll go to Shatter the Sky. And just bring in a 1 of Legion's End and just try that. Pretty removal heavy there in game 1. But could have just been their draws. It's hard to say how much creature focus they might actually have. It's a little awkward, but I think we'll try it. A couple draws to find a black source. If nothing else, the Field of Ruin can get us there. Opponent with no play on turn 1. That's good. I'll go and play our Shadowspear. Why not? We have a turn to play anyway, so gives us something to do. Potentially find a Binding of Titans. Piper of the Swarm. Don't understand that. They had 0 rats or synergy with that. They just had vampires, and now they pull out a Piper of the Swarm. Cloud Princes. This is like a completely different deck. Maybe we do want that Shatter the Sky if they are trying to do all of this nonsense. So let's get our Midnight Reaper down and make that removal. We can just draw some cards. Next turn we have Eat to Extinction or just another Midnight Reaper, depending on what they do here. There we go. So let's get the Extinction target. And eventually, hopefully, we can get this Chupacabra down on their seal. Just taking 2 in the air isn't really ideal. And of course, the Aerialist can get quite large. Very nice to answer that. Fabled Passage can help us get another black source. We're down to 15, so I think we'll just play a little slow here and hold the Reaper back. So next turn will probably Fabled Passage for a swamp, and then Chupacabra the Seer. Okay, minions return, so when the Reaper dies, they get control of it. I'm just going to spam rat tokens. I really want to get rid of this Seer because that's going to keep damaging us, but this Piper of the Storm is pretty obnoxious too. Let's just get rid of the Cloudkin Seer. They just want to waste their turns on pumping out 1/1 rats, then so be it. We do have this Shadowspear to kind of gain us some life back. Live on Legion. Surprised we didn't see that in the first game. Castle Locthwain is pretty good. Alright. So it's Midnight Reaper. And I think we'll just Knight of the Reliquary, just to be mana efficient here. And say go. So if we lose the Midnight Reaper that's enchanted, they're going to get it back. And I think they go, okay, it's the other one that gives them a +1 counter. Dungeon Geist tapping down the Knight of the Reliquary. That's what I would choose. Took me a minute. Let's try to have that figured out before I play. Before I play a spell, try to know what you're doing with it. Alright, it's a pretty awkward board state. We're a little bit behind. Don't think we need these lands out of the graveyard. Could draw. Well, actually, we're missing a black for that. Could just equip. Gain a little bit of life. And if they kill it, we get to draw a card. Okay, we could move the Shadowspear. Make it hard for them to attack in. Seems pretty reasonable. So now we're up to 17. Don't think they have life gain in their deck. They haven't shown us much, even though they are running the Aerialist. So their deck is kind of 2 or 3 different decks in one. So they get our Midnight Reaper. Happen. We do get to draw some cards at least. If we go to game 3 here, we definitely want Shatter the Sky plus that second Legion's End. Can't do anything about the flyer here. kill it, so our Knight of the Reliquary will least untap. Unfortunately, we are getting some nice value with our Midnight Reaper. We just grab a swamp here. And attack with the Shaman. Gain some more life. So we'll trade it back. Maybe we'll put it on the Chupacabra. Probably want that to die. So we do have some ways of getting it back. So they do have the token generator, and they got the Midnight Reaper, so they do have some nice value resources going on their side. 4 cards in hand to our 1. Let's see, we do have the Castle Locthwain that can help us dig. And we should have enough mana to potentially cast anything. But yeah, I would say our opponent is ahead at this point. Unfortunately, what we saw in Game 1 is nothing like what we saw here in Game 2. So 2 completely different looking decks. Guessing our opponent's just newer to Magic. Attack both. I think we'll block both. This should get to draw some cards, but they are just at 1 land. Down to 6, thanks to that. And we can move our Shadowspear. Kaya's Ghost Form, sure. Okay, we have 7 trample plus the 3 is 10. They can should be lethal here. Fabled Passage, just to be sure. Grab that forest. And actually Mire Triton as well. Can fill up our graveyard. 2 lands, how about that? Alright. So we got there. So even though we kind of stumbled here in Game 2, eventually Shadowspear kind of came in clutch. And yeah, we're just going to deal with our opponent's nonsense. It's kind of a weird matchup, but you know, it's a pretty fun deck. Recommend giving it a try. It's a little bit different than like the you know, Get Rog monster that other people play with. It's more kind of a fair mid-rangey version. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty cool cards, some nice synergies going on. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.